When I rise, let me rise like a bird joyfully. And when I fall, let me fall like a leaf gracefully. When I stand, let me stand like a tree strong and tall. And when I lie, let me lie like a lake reflecting all. When I resist, I will resist like the sea relentlessly. And when I speak, I will speak like the wind, loud and free. Words from Wendell Berry. I am part of the Power Interfaith Network, an interfaith organizing grassroots campaign effort that started in Philadelphia but has expanded to encompass all of Pennsylvania. Work that has been behind some of the ballot measures here in Philadelphia and is seeking to make a more just and inclusive city and place with faith roots and moral values as the fundamental ground upon which we do our work. And I'm privileged to be part of what we've been calling the Philadelphia Clergy Caucus. It's a group of faith leaders, of imams, rabbis, ministers, and leaders of humanist traditions, the Baha'i faith, and many others that come together to add the moral voice and weight behind some of the organizing efforts related to green justice, educational reform, economic dignity, and criminal justice reform. It's a very cool group to be a part of, and I feel very lucky. But at a meeting recently, we were talking that this is the Clergy Caucus meeting, and clergy is a word that doesn't always include everyone who's at the table. That clergy often refers to just certain kinds of faith leaders. And I had never thought about that before. I assumed that clergy meant anyone who kind of professionally leads religious institutions. But for others, that word carries either a very Christian context or at least a Jewish and Christian context. It doesn't always feel inclusive. So we started talking about this and said, do we want to be more inclusive, more welcoming? Do we want to say who we are and how we act with what we believe? It's a similar conversation we've been having here at Restoration, right? We stumbled through certain iterations of what we were going to call this group. So we wanted to keep it short and concise. We wanted to make it clear who we were. And so we settled eventually, we thought, on Faith Leaders Caucus. Everybody who was in the room, the digital room, said, yeah, faith leaders. We like that. And one of my rabbi colleagues said, I just have to say this, I'm fine with it, but when I think of Judaism, faith is not the first thing I think of. Word has more of a Christian context to me. Like, I'm fine with it, I just want to put that out there. And I said, oh, I never really thought about that. Thought I spent a fair amount of time with Jewish colleagues and friends, and faith didn't ever seem to have a particular context for me. I thought faith was something more universal. And I was struck by that disconnect, the disconnect I was having. So I've been pondering this all week and thinking about the connections between faith and maybe doubt and belief, and how it all works in a religious system when we have people of multiple beliefs all in the same room. I often say that Unitarian Universalist spaces, we ought to consider ourselves interfaith communities, because that's really what it comes down to. If we're not interfaith, we're at least multi-faith, which is what we say. So I've been thinking about multi-faith spaces and what that means if not everyone operates with an understanding of what faith is. So I want to share my kind of struggles and rumblings with you, and I invite your feedback later today or later this week to see what you think about faith and doubt and belief. And where does imagination roll into all of this? So as I want to do when I struggle with words like this, I go back to my sacred stuff and I looked up some of the original words that we've come to know as doubt and faith and belief. I thought, well, if some Jewish folks don't really identify with faith, what is the opposite of that, I guess, or what is the other side of that? So I went and I started looking up. I found the words for faith in the Hebrew scriptures. And the words that I find are not faith in the way that I was taught to believe in faith. Whereas faith is belief in something that you can't see or can't prove. Right? It's usually belief in something supernatural, or you might have faith in yourself, faith in something that you can't see yet. But there's not a word for that in the Hebrew scriptures that I've read. The word that's often translated for faith is actually the word for truth, or it's a verb that means to put trust in. It's not exactly about belief at all. So I said, okay, well, I've always thought of doubt as the opposite of faith. So let me look up doubt. And in the Hebrew scriptures, there's not a word for doubt in that understanding. But oftentimes the word that gets translated is simply means without a doubt. There's no doubt about this, but there's not a word for struggling with faith, which is what I've been raised to think of doubt as. So then I looked in the Christian scriptures in the Greek, and of course there's a word for faith that's often used. And there's a story about this word faith. The Greek word is pistia. It's where we get the word epistles, if you're familiar with that. Pistia, faith, gets used in this famous story from the Christian scriptures of a father who comes and brings his young son who's suffering from epileptic seizures to try to be healed. And it's a story of a miraculous healing. And the line that often gets lifted out of that story is, Jesus of Nazareth responds, all things are possible for those who have faith, who believe, have pistia is the word. And then the father responds, I believe, help my unbelief. Help my unbelief. So this is the Jewish context, right? What does unbelief mean here? And so I've been thinking about that unbelief, which I was raised to understand as help my doubts. Help when I'm uncertain about things. Give me certainty. But I looked up the word for unbelief, and it's not doubt at all. The word for faith in Greek is pistia. The word for unbelief is apistia, like unfaith, the opposite of faith. And so I thought, well, that's not doubt, though, is it? Because in this Jewish context, right, there is no word for doubt. And the word for faith is actually the word for truth, or to put trust in someone or something. So the search for truth and to have a relationship with or to put trust in something, isn't that what doubt is? The search for truth? If you doubt that something is true, don't you ponder it and search for a truth? And isn't to have a relationship with and to put trust in something or someone, isn't that what faith really is? And I started thinking about it like this. I'm not sure that faith and doubt are opposites. I started thinking about faith as this whole system, and that doubt is a necessary part of it. That maybe the opposite of doubt is actually belief, things that we believe to be true, and then things that we doubt. But they are both part of the truth-seeking mechanism that I call faith. So go with me on this. When this man cries out, "Help my unbelief," I don't think it's saying, "Help my doubts," because doubt often gets a negative connotation, right? We're supposed to think like, "Oh, I'm not supposed to doubt that." At least I was raised this way. I can't have any doubts about that. Or if I have doubts, I'm somehow not doing it right. But if instead we look at doubt as part of the yin and yang with belief, that they're both about trying to find what is true for us as part of this overall system of faith. And so here's what I've started thinking about faith. That faith is maybe not just about believing in something that you can't see, or believing something maybe without evidence. I wonder if faith is rather the process through which humans experience a relationship that helps find truth and make meaning. That both having doubts and having beliefs are part of the same overall process. And if that's true, that if it's all part of the process by which humans experience relationships to find truth and make meaning, then when this father cries, "Help my unbelief," he's not talking about help me overcome my doubts to just go to the other end of the spectrum and be a true believer. He's saying, help my apistia, help my opposite of faith. So the opposite of the process of being in relationship to find truth and make meaning is not doubt. It's something more like disconnection. Or as Jane and I were talking, it's unalignment in that more Eastern tradition. So we have a lot of conversations in Unitarian Universalist circles and in interfaith circles. People struggle with the word faith because it's come to mean a certain kind of belief structure, usually in something supernatural. And I've always thought, I don't think that's true. I think people who consider themselves humanists or atheists or agnostics, I've always said, I think that is faith too. That just because you're not a quote unquote believer doesn't mean you don't have a faith system. Because I believe faith is something universal. I believe it's something deep, inherent, genetic. I believe that we are truth-seeking and meaning-making people by design. That to be human is to be religious, meaning to be a person of faith. Even if you're not sure what your beliefs are in that faith system, you're probably sure what your doubts are. And I think those go together. So to be connected to something bigger than yourself on this search for truth and to help make meaning, that's being in the circle of faith, being in that yin and yang, ebb and flow, as the tides go in and tides go out. I think that's what it is to be human. There's a movie called The Big Lebowski, if you're familiar with it. And the bad guys in this movie are nihilists. They're nihilists. They believe in nothing. And I think that is maybe the opposite of faith. To be connected to nothing, not just to believe in nothing, but to be connected to nothing is what unbelief is. Supreme narcissists who only see themselves, right? Anything that overrides that interdependent web of connection anything that overrides our relationship with something besides ourselves, beyond ourselves, I think that is what unbelief is here. The disconnection from the things within us and the things around us. So I've got a whole new relationship with doubt and with belief and a different understanding of faith. And I want to spend the last few minutes using a wonderful scriptural point of evidence to illustrate this. It's from the musical The Book of Mormon. If you've seen the musical The Book of Mormon, it is based on real life Mormonism, and it is based on the Mormon scriptures, the Book of Mormon. And my intention here is not to poke fun at Mormonism, though that is very much the point of the musical. The musical's point is also to offer a deeper truth about religion and faith and doubt and belief. And I want to illustrate that and lift it up. Because as my seminary professor, Dr. Yolanda Pierce, told us once, listen, the things that Mormons believe are no different, no wilder, no crazier, no more fantastic than what I believe as a Christian. And I think that's kind of true. So a quick recap of this story. The Book of Mormon follows two young Mormon men who are about to go on their mission. It's a 2-year period where they go and they're supposed to convert, to teach, to be in connection with people across the world. Right? So there's a whole colonial message here, and there's a clear racial undertone to all of this that we need to set aside for a second, because the problems are easy to see, whether you've seen the play or not. But that's also part of the journey, right? These Mormons grow up with the idea that they're supposed to go and save people. And one young man wants to go to the city of Orlando for his mission. And instead of going to Orlando, he goes to Uganda on the African continent. It's not exactly what he sets up. And his partner, he thinks they're going to be a super Mormon team. They're going to go and help people and save people. And his partner is not the best Mormon around. Hasn't read the Book of Mormon, isn't really interested in converting people, doesn't really have good people skills. The crux of the story comes when one of the Mormon main characters considers himself to be a super Mormon, read the scriptures, knows what God is asking of him, wants to do it, but then he gets to the place where he's supposed to do his work, and he has a crisis of faith. Because he says, I have prayed and I have done everything that I'm supposed to do, and I'm supposed to get my rewards. Everything is supposed to be good for me. And it doesn't happen. So he has this crisis of faith, and it comes in the musical piece, I Believe. I invite you to look that up if you haven't read it or heard it. And he goes through some of the things that Mormons believe. And the point of the story is, I'm having these doubts, and I'm not supposed to have doubts. So I need to convince myself of my beliefs to be a good person, to be a good Mormon. So he starts saying all the things that Mormons believe. And some of them sound pretty familiar if you're familiar with Christianity. And some are a little bit different, including the funny line, I believe the Garden of Eden is in Jackson County, Missouri. But the point is that this turning point is the disorienting dilemma of a person going through a faith crisis. Because he's not supposed to have any doubt, he thinks. And he goes through a sense of depression and goes on this journey. And on the other hand, his counterpart, who is not real familiar with what the Book of Mormon says, goes to try to convert people and doesn't remember all the details, so he starts to make things up, fill in the details with pop culture references about Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, for example. And lo and behold, the people kind of take to the message. And people start to join this Church of Latter-day Saints, even though the beliefs that they're being taught are not the quote-unquote true ones. So I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's a wonderful story of the super Mormon finding out that having the exact right beliefs are not really as important as having a relationship with his partner, with the people of Uganda, with the people, church, with a higher power, and with himself. That actually faith is bigger than just having the right beliefs. And it ends with a new community being formed, one that is based on love and hope and liberation from oppression. It's very R-rated, so we can't play any of the songs here, or I would have. But I want to lift up, this is a wonderful story about how doubt is not the opposite of faith. That having doubts and having times when you're uncertain are opportunities to learn something new, are opportunities to grow and change. It's an opportunity to open the metaphorical window and let the dove fly in, to find truth and to make meaning. And that the opposite of that is to disconnect and give up and retreat inward. And that's what that story of help my unbelief, the story of healing, is. It's not about silencing doubts. It's about reminding people that you're not alone, that there is healing to be found in community, that there's connection to be found, that there's love to be found, and that doubt, as the theologian Baby J wrote, doubt is a necessary part of faith. You cannot have one without the other. As the tides go in and tides go out, as the rhythm of life ebbs and flows, if your life is like a song, the doubts are not stops in the music. The doubts are the rests. They're an integral part of the whole. My friends, may our unbelief be healed this week and always. The things that disconnect us, the things that make us retreat inward. May we wrestle with our doubts to find truths, and may we revel in doubt as it helps us learn new ways to seek those truths. May we find beliefs, may they shift and change. May we revel in them as the tides go in and out. But may our doubts and our beliefs and our overall faith, may it always lead us towards community, towards hope and love and liberation from oppression. May it always lead us into relationships with higher powers, with community, and with ourselves. That's what I've been wrestling with this week. And I invite you to wrestle too, because we're all on the journey, the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. May we start seeking anew. May it be so.